Welcome to this special presentation. You see the headline behind me, Update on Court Challenge, following in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul. And with me today is Pastor Nathan Thurber and Dean Morris. Good to see you.
Good to be with you.
You ready for an intense program?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to be calling on you a lot. You know, to challenge the government, it can be an act of rebellion, anarchy, or I submit it can be a deeply spiritual activity, because Jesus did again and again, read the Gospels. The apostles did again and again, where there was an overreach of the civil authorities that impaired their ability to share the gospel. A large part of the Christian faith is called the Protestant movement. It really includes evangelicals, Pentecostals, charismatic, mainline, Presbyterians, Anglicans. And so the very word Protestants means that there was a spiritual activity that challenged the authorities that be. So it could be rebellion, or it could be a spiritual activity. Now, for many months here during the pandemic, the Toronto International Celebration Church, we operated at 30% capacity. Our auditorium seats just under 1,100, and we followed all the rules, public health guidelines, sanitizing, 2 meters apart, all that, and that's well documented. And then, in effect, the government banned church service. Well, not entirely. There was an allowance of 10 people to gather. And we challenged that in court. We didn't enter civil disobedience. Some others did, a few, very few, but some did. We did not. We challenged the government. And later on in today's program, you're going to hear exactly what our lead counsel, Michael Lacey, had a team of lawyers, but you see his picture right there from BT Legal, what he argued. And I tell you, as I sat in the courtroom, I had been cross-examined myself prior to that, but as I listened to him on the Zoom hearing, I was very proud of his, and he spoke for length, but we're just going to give you a little clip of that. But before any of that, here is Peter's perspective. Statements like "stay safe" and "safety is number one" have been repeated like a mantra over the past months of government lockdowns. Naturally, we all want safety, and the government has promised safety. We will be able to travel when it's safe. Schools will open when it's safe, and church services will be back, but only when it's safe. In exchange for the promise of future safety, we have surrendered constitutionally guaranteed freedoms. And frankly, most people seem happy to do so. Government officials have determined what is essential and what is non-essential. They know best, I speak tongue-in-cheek, what is safe and what is not. Meanwhile, owners of clothing stores and restaurants are left to wonder why large box stores are safe while they are not. Better not ask. After all, the quote-unquote experts know best. You know, Christians tend to be an agreeable lot. And we have mostly played along, even encouraging. Of course, churches should be the first to close down. What loving pastor would want to endanger his church? So, is safety the number one issue? What do I want from my government? Safety or freedom of opportunity? What do you value most? The government's promise to keep you safe, or your freedom to determine for yourself what is safe? My safety is not ultimately the government's responsibility, it is mine. The claim that church is non-essential and unsafe is a testimony to the incompetence of officials, some of whom haven't darkened the door of a church for years. What do these government officials really know? Well, give me freedom of opportunity, and I will decide what's safe. No, I'm not advocating that everybody should congregate even with physical distancing and other safety precautions in place. Nor am I saying that you have to go to a church building in order to be a good Christian. I'm not saying that. Though, to be sure, for the past 2,000 years, Christians have met in in-person gatherings. If being safe is the most important issue, then where do we end up? Smoking is not safe. Should it be banned? altogether. Smoking-related diseases is one of the top causes of death. Should driving be restricted? Is that safe? Maybe raise the age limit of driver's license to 25-year-old or maybe 35-year-old. Alcohol consumption is not safe. Should liquor stores be closed? A large number of deaths occur due to drunk driving. Cannabis stores, I won't even go there. Before the pandemic, was it ever safe to go anywhere or do anything? Is it ever safe to leave your home? And then again, is it safe to stay at home? Too much loneliness and isolation lead to mental illness and even suicide. Safely said, no pun intended, if we will only go to church or to go to the shopping center once it's safe, we will never go. Life has never been safe, and it never will be. From possible crib death, your first day on earth, until the last day you cross a busy street, danger is always lurking. But the government has effectively banned church services for your safety. In Ontario, a maximum of 10 people are allowed in attendance regardless of the size of the auditorium. Other jurisdictions from British Columbia to Newfoundland allow for 5 or maybe 15 or other variants of a number of worshipers. Big Brother has decided for you. You can't choose. Meanwhile, according to government directives, you are capable to decide whether or not to shop at a box store like Costco or Walmart. You are capable to decide whether to go to a liquor store. You are capable to decide whether or not to put your kids in daycares. But you are not competent to decide whether or not to attend a church service held under the strictest public health guidelines. The folks, the ones I'm talking about, who travel south themselves in defiance of their own strict guidelines, they don't trust you. I don't trust you, my fellow believers, to make decisions about church for yourself. Quickly, and with hardly a whimper, we have surrendered our constitutional rights and freedoms for a vain promise of safety. So I say, thanks, but no thanks. Give me freedom of opportunity, and I will choose for myself what is safe. So everybody, here it is, stay safe, but above all, stay free. Well, I'm going to turn to Nathan and Dean here. Tell me what I said wrong and what you don't agree with, or I go to you first, Dean.
I love what you said there right at the very end. Stay safe, but stay free. And I think it's really a matter of freedom, and we have a very important choice to make here.
Nathan, I know you have grappled with this issue a lot, so I don't know what you're going to say, but fire away.
Well, there's a saying going around, I've heard, rules for thee and not for me. And, you mentioned the government officials going south. In fact, there's 41 documented cases of government officials in our land breaking the rules this year.
How many did you say?
41.
41.
41, including our Prime Minister, including Premier of our province here in Ontario, including Mayor of Toronto, Mayor of Vancouver, including cabinet ministers like the Health Minister of Canada, party leaders like Andrew Scheer, Aaron O'Toole, Elizabeth May, Prime Minister. They've all broken the rules, and that's just the ones that have been documented. So maybe, I don't know, do they believe the rules themselves? But beyond that, for each of us, I think I would propose that safety first, that attitude, is a luxury of the wealthy. And I myself would initially say, and like many of our viewers, and say, well, I'm not wealthy, I'm not rich. But if the statistics have shown that if you have $4,000 to your name, you're in the top 50 percentile in the entire world. $4,000, that's not a lot. And so I would say for those of us here in North America, Canada, they say, what's poverty? Poverty is having no access to education, proper health care, education, sanitization, or water. We have that here in Canada, so we'd be considered wealthy. In other words, when we're off work, we get CERB, we get EI. There's a large swath of the world that doesn't have that, and I think that, these lockdowns have shown that it's increased poverty exponentially in parts of the world where they don't have this social safety net. They say that in the UN's, their statistics say that poverty, the number of people in poverty will swell to 1.2 billion people this year alone. And so, I guess we who are wealthy here in Canada, we have that luxury. And so I guess if we want to say safety for us and to hell with the rest of them, let's do that. But let's be clear about that. It's safety for us alone. I was talking, last point, I was talking to my barber, he's from Syria. He said, my people in Syria would rather die of coronavirus than live in the hellhole that they live in today. So let's be clear about the total picture of safety first.
I noticed you got your hair cut there. You gave it away. I hope that wasn't a criminal activity, was it? I'll leave that alone. Very good points you made there. And so we are standing up, Nathan. We have hammered equality under the law. And just summarize again to people watching, we're not saying that everybody has to go to church. What were we arguing about? Just in a couple of sentences, summarize that.
To be treated equally with other businesses, like take, for example, the film studios that could have rented our building and put 50% of capacity. We were only asking for 30%, but we're denied. We're not saying we don't follow, we all wore our masks on the set here today. We follow the rules, but let us meet.
Absolutely. Well, I was so proud on December 18th, and of course, it reflected the situation. Some of the rules have changed a little bit since that time. When our lead counsel, Michael Lacey from BT Legal, you see his picture there again, when he began to argue, I felt like I was almost in a revival meeting, though it was very much a courtroom, and he would tell you himself he's not a religious believer necessarily. But Dean, I want you to, now don't use your preacher voice here, Dean. I want your legal lawyerly voice here. I want you to hear as Dean just reads the opening few minutes of what Michael Lacey shared with the court.
So he started on December 18th, 2020. This Sunday in Toronto, people will go about their businesses at various indoor locations. They will attend to their errands beyond simply obtaining provisions for the necessities of life. Film and television production crews can continue filming at venues throughout the city, including hotel banquet rooms, sound stages, and churches. Massage therapists, acupuncturists, and naturopaths can continue to see their clients and administer treatments. Liquor stores will remain open for people to stock up on wine, liquor, or beer. And when Monday comes around, lawyers, accountants, insurance agents, stockbrokers, steelworkers, automotive plant employees, pet groomers and dog walkers, professional athletes and future Olympians, and those that work in media entertainment can drop their children off at daycares or schools and congregate at their indoor places of employment without capacity restrictions. They are being entrusted to follow health and safety plans. All of these services and activities are permitted under the current gray lockdown rules, some with capacity restrictions and some without. Public health physicians and scientists tell us that with any permitted indoor activity or service where the public or employees congregate, whether essential or not, there is a risk of transmission of COVID-19, but that health and safety protocols can reduce that risk. The government of Ontario has decided that although risk cannot be eliminated, other considerations warranted permitting these secular activities to continue. But congregants of the International Celebration Church will not be free to congregate or assemble with similar reduced capacity limits and appropriate health and safety measures. They will not be allowed to exercise their constitutional right to worship indoors. It is claimed that this constitutionality protected service and activity is too risky and must be limited to no more than 10 people gathering at a 13,000 square foot auditorium that seats more than 1,000. This is so the government has declared even though a television or major motion picture production company could film the very same religious service with paid actors and extras for entertainment purposes, an absurdity that even the medical experts have not attempted to justify.
Now, before you read the rest of it there, because he draws a very powerful line, and some of what I said in my monologue, of course, I was inspired with what Michael Lacey shared there, and he is showing the unfairness and the bias in this. But just before you read, because I have a copy, so I know where you're at on this, and again, we want to give all the credit to Michael Lacey, so let people know at home who he is, if you can see his picture there from BT Legal. Then he makes a closing, but it's not a closing because this is actually the early part. He went on for, I don't know, maybe not an hour, but for quite a length. Just that last paragraph that we're going to include, which I think is so powerful. So go ahead and read that, Dean.
The measure of a constitutional democracy is not how it tolerates, permits, or fosters the exercise of guaranteed rights and freedoms at times when it is easy to do so. Constitutional democracies are measured by how government responds during difficult times, including times of crisis.
I think, Nathan, that is so powerful because the test of anything is when you're under pressure. It's fine to go around saying we have constitutional freedom, we have all this rights and freedoms of religion when there's no challenge. The test is, and he made that so powerfully. I want to ask you this, what do you think? What do you think? In a moment, I'm going to go to Nathan here. He's going to give us a little bit of highlights from the cross-examinations. I was cross-examined as well, but I don't know if he has any highlights from mine. You can go to our website, by the way, and you get all the documentation. You'll have a day full of reading if you looked at all those papers. And then we want you to go and vote. Is church essential? What do you think? Is church essential? Or should the people maybe who haven't been to church for decades, should they be able to decide that it's not essential? Well, maybe you think so. I don't know. You can go and vote. And also at that same place, you see it right there. You have the litigation statement. And you also, when you do vote, we give you an option for something very nice. You'll have the opportunity to win a trip later on in 2021, at the very end towards the end of the year, to Israel. So there's a little bit of a teaser in there for you, but go and check that out. Then you'll see from time to time, the producer will put that up at the lower part of the screen. Nathan, I'm going to go to you. So again, to summarize, people just tuned in. We are looking for equality under the law. We're not looking for preferential treatment, even though our Constitution gives us preferential treatment. There's no guarantee of economic freedom in Canada, but there is a guarantee of religious freedom. But we're not even asking for that. Just treat us equal. And so, again, we are drawing on Michael Lacey's and his team of lawyers' work. And you can see all the names of the lawyers there on our website as well. What did you find? Just give us some of the highlights from the cross-examinations of various doctors.
Absolutely highlights, because there were hundreds and hundreds of pages. Here are the doctors called by the Crown or the government to expand their case. What I did find was, first of all, we appreciate doctors' work, but we found a lack of awareness or consideration of religious worship. For example, Dr. Yasmin Khan of Public Health Ontario, she produced in her affidavit 142 articles, or links to 142 articles, that proved the high transmission rate of the virus in public gatherings. And yet, as proved by Michael Lacey and the other legal team, not one of those 142 articles were linked directly to studies on religious worship service settings with social distancing practice. No peer studies were included in 142 articles. Going on, Dr. Matthew Hodge, and again, we appreciate these individuals. It's just this was their testimony. Dr. Matthew Hodge, he in his statement, he said there were 134 cases since February 2020 linked to places of worship in Ontario. All of Ontario, 134 cases linked. At that time, there were approximately 144,000 cases total in Ontario. So 134 cases is of 144,000, that's 0.09% of cases. Less than 1 in 1,000 were linked to places of worship. And of those 134 people who are connected to places of worship, not a single statistic is out there that shows how many of those were hospitalized, asymptomatic, or even false positives.
So I got to pause you there, because that's an astounding. I mean, that's astounding what Nathan shared. That this comes out of the doctor's mouth, out of his testimony.
Absolutely, yeah.
That out of all the cases, 144,000 at that time, less than 1 in 1,000 was connected to religious worship. So why such a heavy hand compared to with box stores and others? Go ahead there, Nathan. I just had to pause and just take that in.
Absolutely. Dr. David McCowan, another expert called by the government, Associate Medical Health Officer, he was asked, were there any formal consultations whatsoever with Christian organizations? His answer, not that I'm aware of. Our legal team asked, are you aware of any super spreader events associated with religious worship here in Ontario? Answer, I can't say I'm aware of any super spreader events connected to places of worship. The question was asked, there are studies in peer-reviewed journals that recognize that religious worship tends to promote better mental health. Answer, I'm not aware of those studies. It's not a subject that I have made a study of myself. Again, this is the individual called as an expert on religious, our right as constitutionally to have religious worship. The last question, to your knowledge, have there been any studies conducted surrounding the initial lockdown by canvassing religious worshipers and gathering data on their spiritual and mental health and possibility of decline when they were unable to engage in personal religious worship? Answer, not to my knowledge. So again, it seems to be there was no consideration to religious worship. Last doctor, cut me off if I am out of time, Pastor Peter.
No, go ahead.
Dr. Vinita Dubé. She brought up in hers that essential business is simply those chosen by government. Of course, we hear government continually say they just follow what the doctors say. It seems to be circular reasoning. Also, as part of proof that we were not worthy of having religious services at 30% capacity, they produced an inspection report where there was a deficiency. We didn't have the proper sign up. And yet, when asked and when pressed, she did say, quote unquote, at the time of inspection, the church was in compliance. We passed it with flying colors. Also, she's on 680 News, a talk show, and she was asked on that talk show regularly. She's on that show. She was asked, why are children allowed to sit in small classrooms for the entire day? In other words, 23 students in a small room, but we cannot congregate at 30% places of worship. Her answer, the guidelines were being followed during the service, but then afterwards everyone gets a hug before they leave, and then the virus spreads that way. Our legal team said, in other words, our people do not follow the rules. I disagree, but that's the premise of the argument being made by that doctor. And finally, we produced a safety video that I personally did for our church when we were reopening at 30% capacity. I started, and I was outlining all the safety measures of wearing masks and social distancing when coming to church that Sunday. Now, in that video, I started with a mask on, and then I took it off for the purpose of relaying my message to the audience watching. I was the only person on camera, the only person in the room other than a camera person. I was initially said by that doctor to be breaking a bylaw. When pressed by our legal team, she reenacted that statement and said, oh, I don't mean to say that he was breaking the law, but what I do mean to say he was not acting as a role model as I would expect. Having said that, on December, when I saw our government announce the new lockdown measures, I saw 5. I think they have the picture there. I took a picture of it because I was astounded. I was a bad role model as a single person on a camera, but there at December announcing the new restrictions, I see 5 people, government-elected officials, without a single mask on. So it seems that we're being held to even a higher standard than our elected officials.
Two things strikes me here. That equality under the law. We're not asking for, even though the Charter of Rights and Freedoms gives us preferential treatment as a religious group. We're not asking for that. Then I noticed something else. There's just lack of awareness.
I think so.
There's some stereotypical image here of that we kind of all get together and hug and kiss after the service. We can't control ourselves. We're evangelical Christians. We're probably weak-minded. We can't control ourselves. Let me tell you something. We have far better health practices in this church. Every Sunday, I've gone to Walmart, I've gone to Costco, maybe you have as well, and I tell you, they got nothing on us. We could teach them how to train people to keep their distance and how to have people not interacting. And so it's a very stereotypical, offensive view. And by the way, to support what you were saying here, how they were unaware, I want to help the health officials here. The Gallup poll, I think I gave it to our producer here, so you have it there. Gallup's annual health and healthcare service release in November shows that weekly attenders of religious services are the only demographic group that showed improved mental health in 2020. This is an annual survey done in November. And so, for example, in 2019, a year ago, a little bit more of that survey, 42% of people who attend regular religious services claim to have excellent mental health. And this year, it was 46%. We were the only demographic group. Every other group in society that was tested for mental health had declined during the pandemic, except those who were attending weekly religious services. Well, I hope I don't sound too biased here, but the way we teach about the victory of Jesus Christ, I think we'd have a higher percentage than that, but this is the average of all religions. So don't be offended at that, but I'm merely pointing it out. I want to say we want to just, you may want to watch this program twice. It'll be available on the peteryoungren.org website. We want you to go and vote as well. Is church essential? We want to hear what you think, and there's all kinds of legal document attached to that when you go there, and they'll put it up again before the end of the program. But leave it there for a moment right now. And so I want to say some encouraging things. First of all, we received a lot of support during this time. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association supporting us, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, the Christian Defense Fellowship, and the judge in her initial ruling. There was 2 parts to our lawsuit. One is still outstanding. The first one, the smaller one, was to try to open up before Christmas, which is now a little while back, and we knew that probably would never happen, but we went for it anyhow. You say, well, why would you go for that? Well, if nobody speaks up, then everybody thinks they can just ignore us, as seemingly has been done by the record that Nathan shared. The churches, we kind of these little quiet church mice that don't raise our voice. We just want, like the Apostle Paul, what he wanted, he said, treat me like a Roman citizen. I want to be treated like everybody else. The Apostle Paul didn't go into hiding in the book of Acts and say, I just leave it to the Lord, the Lord will work it out. No, the Lord was working through him to challenge the civil authorities, and he claimed his rights as a citizen. And so when it came to the ruling of the judge, we were denied the opening before Christmas, which we were asking only for 30%. So it's less than many other places that had 50%. But the judge spoke very favorably and agreed. She said that what I had said, she said what Reverend Youngren said on the affidavit, that this was an impairment and an infringement on the religious rights. She agreed. She agreed that there's irreparable harm done when the freedom of religion is infringed upon in this manner. So there were some great victories. And in fact, Nathan, just because we're getting so short on time, I'm speaking as fast as I can, but do you have an update? Where are we at right now?
Well, since the hearing of the motion, Ontario has entered a province-wide gray zone lockdown. In other words, many permitted secular activities at that time, prior to the gray lockdown, have now been prohibited or limited in the same manner as church services. So the hearing of the ultimate application which will determine the constitutionality of a 10-person limit on religious worship, has been adjourned until February 2021, at which point dates may be set for the ultimate hearing.
For 2,000 years, Christians have been gathering, whether in buildings, doesn't have to be a building, it could be different settings. And we can say, well, what about online? You know, the fact is this, in an online service, the worshiper is surrounded by familiar surroundings, all kinds of potential distractions, and simply it is difficult to maintain a single-hearted focus, often impossible. Phone is ringing. Their kids gathering in one place with other believers. It means you can focus, you can be concentrated, and you have the ability to receive from the Lord. And so I hope this has enlightened you. There were many things. In fact, I have documents in front of me I wanted to cover. We are not able to do that. Let me say we're going to go back to regular talking, a regular program. We are having some exciting things coming up this week. But we'd urge you again, go and vote. Is church essential? And then you can say yes or no. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to agree with us. We're all right. We're not so thin-skinned. We can take it if you disagree, if you think we have overreached. We think the government has overreached. But you can go there, and there's all kinds of documentation there. And also there, you can also see something, as I said, a benefit for you if you cast your vote either way. Well, it's been great. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Nathan. We spoke so fast. We got a lot accomplished. And we want to say this is another way to share God's love. Involved in a little bit of protest. We are Protestants. You are loved.
Thank you. Your participation makes this global gospel ministry possible. To share your prayer request or to help bring the gospel to those who have never heard it, call 416-745-1820. You can give at www.peteryoungren.org or send your gift to World Impact Ministries at P.O. Box 62039 RPO Victoria Terrace, North York, Ontario, N4A 2W1, or P.O. Box 433 Winchester, Kentucky 40392-9800. Together, let's give everyone a chance to know God's love in Jesus Christ.